Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The power of a government to make appointments till it cedes office is a well-established and accepted norm. However, questions are always raised about its timing when a government's term is ending. The UPA government, which is apparently in the process of making some key appointments like the next army chief and the Lokpal, is being questioned. The appointment of the army chief, which normally takes place a few months before the incumbent chief retires, has also been objected to by the BJP, which has petitioned the Election Commission. The process of appointment of the Lokpal has also been objected to by the BJP, which feels that hasty selection can defeat the entire purpose of appointing the Ombudsman. With less than a month to go for the new government to take office, the question is whether there are any legal hurdles or is it just the moral and ethical dimensions of the appointment which is a problem. To discuss this, I have with me Ajay Prasad, former Defence Secretary to the Government of India, Lieutenant General Kadyan, retired Vice Chief of Army Staff, Bhat, former Additional Solicitor General of India and a senior advocate in the Supreme Court, and Vinod Sharma, political editor at Hindustan Times. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Ajay Prasad, I'd like to come to you first. Do you think this is just an ethical and moral issue, or do you see any legal hurdles in the appointment of the Army Chief?
No, I feel that the appointment of the Army Chief is a process which is internal to the government without any political personalities coming into it.
Right.
And therefore, it's a normal vacancy that is going to be caused by the retirement of the outgoing Army Chief. And the process is, as I said, is internal to the government machinery and should not pose any legal difficulties in filling up the post.
The point is that the incumbent Army Chief is retiring on July 31st. If I'm right. Now, retiring on July 31st, there are still several 3 months to go.
The practice
and the new government will be in place after May 16th, say around the end of May or even the last week of May. So why can't it be left to the new government to make this appointment?
Let me put this in some kind of a time perspective. See, as you said, the incumbent Army Chief would be retiring on 31st of July.
Right.
It has been the convention and the practice in the ministry that you notified the new appointment of a chief 2 months before the date of superannuation of the outgoing chief. So therefore, by going by the past practice, latest by 1st of June, you should notify the successor.
Right.
Because that gives enough time for the incoming chief to familiarize himself with all get a proper briefing, work as a kind of an understudy for some time and acquaint himself fully. Now, before you notify, there are a number of processes that have to go through earlier. You have to update all the CR dossiers of the people who are likely to be in the zone of considerations, receive various inputs about any pluses or minuses of each of the candidates. And this process itself also requires some time. Now, if you have to stick to the date, somebody could argue that why is it that you must hold this 2 months period as sacrosanct,
exactly,
and why couldn't you do it earlier?
Yes.
But let's assume that we would like to stick to this convention of a 2 months notification, then the process has already begun. You see, all this collection of data, the CRs, the various inputs that are required, etc. And the detailed note which the Defence Secretary sends up to the Raksha Mantri and then on to the Prime Minister, that work would have already begun, I dare say. And therefore, I feel, and secondly, a more important point is that I feel that the appointment of the Army Chief should not be linked to the political developments that are going to take place. Army has been apolitical, and I think it should remain so.
It should remain so. Lieutenant General Kadyan, there are two issues to it. One is, Mr. Prasad has explained it in detail, the whole process. But there is also some questions being raised about the person being thought of as the next Army Chief. Do you see any problem there?
Girish, no, I don't see a problem. Let me touch it in a different manner. The chief is appointed out of the army commanders and the vice chief, they are at power. There are 8 of them.
Right.
All of them have come through 5 very tough selection boards. Statistically, 40% only make it in each board. So they are in the top 1.024% of their batch.
Okay.
Now, out of them, there is no further selection needed. They have been tested operationally. Army Command is the biggest operational command in our army. They have all done that.
Yes.
Now, there is no further selection. The convention says that the senior most,
Right.
seniority is not gifted to him. Seniority has merit inbuilt into it. After 4 years of training, when he passed out as an officer, a merit list was drawn,
Okay.
and that forms his seniority.
Unlike in the civil services.
There is nothing wrong with the senior most person. If there is something wrong, then you go to the next one. But if there is nothing, the point I want to make is that today the country is riven apart on religious, on sectarian, on caste lines. Army is one institution that has stayed totally loyal to the constitution and totally apolitical, as Mr. Ajay Prasad has said. Some politicians, out of short-term gains, have been making very irresponsible statements and trying to drag the army and appointment of the army chief into political arena, which is a very dangerous game.
Right.
We should learn a lesson from our neighbors and keep the army totally out of politics. The third point is about the code of conduct. I mean, I read in the paper that one of the political parties has gone to the election commission. The code of conduct, as I understand, forbids only those actions which can influence voting. Why would a voter be influenced whether A becomes the army chief or B becomes the army chief? That's academic. The time required, in fact, the previous army chief, the present one, was nominated 3 months in advance. Therefore, by 1st May, they should have nominated the next one. Even if we give it 2 months, as Mr. Ajay Prasad says, 1st June, the new government won't have the time. They will come only later half of May. How will they process this case, even if they give it the top priority? Take the case of the naval chief. The present one, the chair had fallen vacant.
Right.
When he resigned on 26 February. Therefore, everything must have been moved post haste. It has taken 50 days to clear.
Right.
So if you give that much of time, it will take minimum 2 to 3 months for the file to be cleared by the committee. Committee doesn't meet as a committee. There are 3 members, the Prime Minister, Home Minister and the Defence Minister. The file moves to all of them.
Okay.
Which is processed at each ministry, so it takes time.
Okay. Mr. Bhat, this one is of course this whole army chief issue. The second is about the bigger objection which the BJP seems to be raising seems to be on the appointment of the Lokpal. How do you look at it? They say that it will be hasty if the government goes ahead and appoints a Lokpal at this point of time. So there are demands that it be left to the next government. Mr. Bhat, can you hear me? I think there is a problem with the audio. We'll go back to him. Vinod, the question is of the army chief, and he has said that. Incidentally, I was going through. I was doing some research on this, and I found that in 2004, 2 days before the results came, that was on 11th of May 2004, 13th of May the results came. The NDA appointed Arun Prakash as the Navy chief. So, how do you look at the objection of the BJP now?
Well, of course, I think that 2-3 points are there. First of all, I think General Kadyan is right that, and Mr. Prasad is right that we should do nothing to politicize the Indian Army. But I think Indian Army already stands politicized because an army chief who demitted office just a few months back was a regular candidate of the BJP.
No, I think I need to put this also in straight. Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan also was a candidate of the Aam Aadmi Party.
No, I want to make that point. I want to make that point. I want to make that point. That I think that, what has disturbed me as one person who is great believer in the majesty of the Indian Army and also the majesty of the Indian Constitution and the concept of fair play in administration and in politics. What disturbed me was that 4 important positions which should be above politics, we should be insulated from politics. We need to have people who are not partisan at all in these positions, namely the Secretary of the RNAW, the Home Secretary, and the army chief. Now, three people who have held this position have joined political parties, one political party, and two of them have entered the electoral fray together with the just retired or just relieved chief of the Bombay police. Now, it's amazing that why is there no cooling off period for people holding these positions between holding those positions and joining active politics. There is a need for a cooling off period.
I'm sure.
Cooling off period. Now we'll come to the appointment of the new army chief. Look, who has politicized this? The former army chief himself. He is the person who had brought a case against General Suhag, and he is the person who is now objecting to the elevation of General Suhag as the next chief of the army staff. I think that BJP, the Congress and every other political party has to come to a consensus that look, let these appointments be made the way they are made without any comment by any political party on the professionalism of the Indian Army. I don't think any politician in this country has the capacity to teach professionalism to the Indian Army. I mean, they have been the most professionally run. There are aberrations here and there, but the broad understanding is that the Indian Army, the army chief even salutes the governor of a state.
So
I mean,
Vinod,
what are we talking about?
Vinod, raising these kind of objections, are you saying that raising these kind of objections, going to the election commission with a petition on this, is politicizing the whole thing?
I think that it demoralizes the Indian Army. You see, General Suhag even now is commanding a whole lot of men in the Indian Army, and the men he is commanding, what is his writ? What is the value of his writ? Where does he stand with them when he is being discussed in public, while this matter should have been discussed behind closed doors and not being turned into an election issue?
Okay.
This is not fair at all.
Okay, I think we got Mr. Bhat now on the... Mr. Bhat, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, Mr. Bhat, the question is, there are two questions. One is, of course, about the army chief, the appointment of the army chief, which the BJP has objected to. They have gone to the election commission with a petition saying that it should not be done at this point of time. The second one, of course, is about the Lokpal, appointment of the Lokpal. As far as the army chief is concerned, first, what is your view on that? You think it's a process of appointment which should be gone ahead as usual, or you think that there are ethical and moral dimensions to this appointment, or even legal dimensions?
There is no legal prohibition. Just because the election is declared, the country need not be in a coma. But I agree that appointment of army generals and all should not be the subject matter of any public debate at all.
Right.
They should never be, because it is not in the interest of the country. They are wholly an apolitical organization, and we should not drag them into being discussed one way or the other, and they have got no opportunity of replying to any one of them. And there is no law prohibiting appointing, but propriety may require that if you can delay it until the next government, which is to be formed in the month of May, somebody may delay it. And
Right.
As far as the Lokpal is concerned, there I have different stand, because Lokpal, the army general's tenure is fixed for
Right.
another 2 years or 3 years. He will be there depending upon his age. But in the case of Lokpal, they cannot be removed except by a process of impeachment type of thing.
Right.
So but the Lokpal, I should say that Lokpal should be delayed until the next Prime Minister, whoever is there, because he is one of the members of the selection committee. The new committee should select and not the present one.
Okay, no, the question actually, as far as the Lokpal is concerned, the question is that there is a process of a search committee sitting first and then, suggesting name or recommending names to the selection committee. I don't think we still have a search committee in place.
And there is no search
think that is the
committee
problem?
There is no search committee now, because Justice Thomas resigned, Mr. Fali Nariman has resigned, and I don't think that any replacement has been made.
Right. Mr. Ajay Prasad, on this whole Lokpal issue, I'm sure, having been...
So there is the first step, there is no question about appointing a Lokpal now, and in any case, no corrupt person is in a hurry to be tried.
Okay. Mr. Prasad, having served in the government for so long, and I'm sure you have been following the debate on the Lokpal, do you agree with Mr. Bhat on this, or you think that this is also similar like the process of the appointment of
No,
an army chief?
I agree with Mr. Bhat on this issue. This is the question of appointment of a Lokpal is quite different from that of the army chief, which we were discussing a little while back. And as Mr. Bhat brought out, the process of selection cannot be completed, though the government may wish it to in the time available. As there is no search committee, there have been questions raised about the search committee that was formulated earlier. Yes. 2 members have resigned, their replacements have not yet been notified. So, I don't think it is at all possible, feasible at all for this government, the time that it has left, to appoint a new Lokpal. And I entirely agree that this is something that should not be rushed through. This is a process where political personalities are in the final selection process.
Right.
And it would be appropriate for them, the new incumbents of the office of the Prime Minister or the leader of opposition, etc., to be able to make up their mind on this very critical appointment, which is being done for the first time in the country.
So, the difference you're trying to, the differentiation between the appointment of an army chief and the Lokpal, what you have said is the fact that the appointment of the Lokpal is a political process.
It is a political
because
process.
Because there are political leadership involved, yes. The Prime Minister is involved, the leader of opposition is involved.
Girish, one more point.
Yes, Mr. Bhat.
Yeah, you see, the army chief, as I said, that he will surely retire on the appointed day.
Right.
Whereas a Lokpal will continue up to 70 is appointed, and it cannot be removed easily except with the process of impeachment, which in a truncated parliament it will be almost impossible.
So but what is the point you are trying to make, Mr. Bhat, that Lokpal being appointed? Why are you raising the issue of impeachment or the tenure of the Lokpal? What are your concerns?
You see, this election, the person selected, the person selected may not be fit. In a hurry, when you appoint somebody, you may find that there was not enough time to fully scrutinize the appointment. And if you find that something error has been made, in the case of an army chief, it is for 2 years. In any case, they have got a system in place.
Right.
It is not for the first time. Here, we are doing something for the very first time.
Right. General Kadyan, you also wear another hat which is discussed. You are an Aam Aadmi Party member. You have contested the elections. You come back after the elections which you have contested in Rajasthan. How do you look at this whole Lokpal thing? Because as far as your party is concerned, this has been one of the major points on which they have actually the party has been formed.
I will speak as an individual, not
yes.
as a party man. First of all, the army chief is a professional person. He is selected based on his service record, which is not available in the public domain.
Right.
And secondly, he has to be appointed by a fixed date.
Right.
Because you can't wait, you can't give extension to the president chief just because of the election. So, two are quite different. As far as the Lokpal is concerned, I think the appointment is political. There is no doubt about it. So, there is no fixed date. He can be delayed by 2 months or 3 months. The government either should not appoint him or should take the opposition in confidence. At this stage, that's only right that the Lokpal should not be rushed through. They should wait until the whole dust is settled, or take the opposition in confidence.
Opposition to confidence. You think that is feasible or possible, Vinod, in this circumstances what we are going through now?
You see, the selection committee of the Lokpal is a bipartisan selection committee. And the search committee, not only have the people quit the search committee, but there is also a question raised, and if I remember correctly, it was raised by Mr. Narima,
yes.
that the whole process of a search mechanism limits the options to a few who have been searched.
Who have already been searched by the
already been
bureaucracy.
searched, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So I think that, you see, the whole process which has been put in place needs another look, A. B, you see, what I was told was that some of the sitting judges of the Supreme Court,
Yes.
you know, they send forms to people, and some of them have filled up those forms and sent them,
No,
to,
they have,
the, sent
they
them
have
to the
applied.
government.
They have applied.
They've applied, and that includes, to my knowledge, the Chief Justice of India. Now, Chief Justice of India, who has nominated a person to the selection committee, if he himself is a candidate, you look at the crisis which will come to face the nominee of the Chief Justice on the selection panel. So I think that one needs to set the ground rules clearly.
No, but
and
Vinod,
as pointed out by Mr. Bhat, that this is an appointment which is being made for the first time in this country. And there is always, a potential for mistake, there is scope for mistake, there is scope for wrong selection, and especially when you are doing it in a hurry. This, this country has waited for the Lokpal since independence. Right. This country can wait a couple of more months to have a Lokpal on whom there is an all-round consensus and who enjoys the trust and the confidence.
So Vinod, you, by and large, you
I think
agree with the objection of the
it
BJP?
is in violation of all political propriety. The government should
Why do
hold
you
itself
think? Why
back.
do you think the government is in? If it is in haste, because from all reports that the process is on. So why is it in such a haste? Why can't
There could be 2-3 factors which are guiding the government. One, that it wants to claim the Lokpal's appointment as its legacy, as also the putting in place of the system of the Lokpal. They want to claim it as a legacy. This could be one point. And the other point could be that, they apprehend that if there is a change of government, that the new Lokpal may not be appointed the way they expect it to be appointed. So this is whole thing is born out of political distrust between mainline parties.
Like all of you agree, it's a political process. They're seeing the politicization. Mr. Bhat, my question is, if the government insists on going ahead with the selection process, is there a provision in the Lokpal Act itself for them to overlook the search committee process and directly go to the selection process?
Yes, of course, because the one of the objections raised by Mr. Nariman and also Justice Thomas is that you have got a limited menu card.
Right.
You have to select out of that. The
Right.
menu card supplied by the Ministry of Personnel.
Right.
And there are whatever little items are there, you have to choose one of them. It may not be the suitable one at all, because the time because let us assume that they are acting bona fide, but even then the chances of erring in the present selection is very high.
No,
And so they better avoid it.
No, my point is different, Mr. Bhat. It's not, I know the erring can take place at any point of time. Even the next selection committee can err. That's not my point is, can the government, in terms of law, in terms of the act, can it skip the search committee?
It is impossible at the present situation.
Can it skip the search committee process? That's what I'm asking.
At the law stands today, if they appoint somebody, it will be struck down by the courts.
And can if the leader of opposition, who is one of the members of the selection committee, if he or she decides not to participate in the selection committee process, would they be justified legally not participating?
Yeah, that is by a majority decision. If in everything all right, it is by majority decision. But in this case, with the bypassing several steps, and well, anybody can go and challenge it.
Okay.
And there is no question about it. I am fairly confident, though I am not very confident about every case. In
Right.
this case, I am fairly confident that it will be struck down.
Mr. Bhat, Vinod has a question.
Sir,
for
I have
you.
a question of you. Assuming that the Lokpal who is appointed is the
Yes.
sitting Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is about to retire, even in that case, it will be struck down.
Yes. Even then, it makes no difference, because one of the things is that in the courts, it doesn't matter who is the person. It is the process of appointment which will be questioned and which will be adjudicated. Because it doesn't matter who is the person. the number one. And number two, well, our retired Chief Justices are not immune from either any sort of allegation or otherwise, as we know very well now.
Yeah.
So, you know, this whole it is one other thing which Vinod also was mentioning earlier about you know, the way this whole selection is happening. You know, there was public notice, there were advertisement issued in the media for, you know, calling for nominations, calling for applications. You think that these are all things which may need a relook after a new government is in place?
This is Girish, this is one experiment done in England for the selection of the judges to the higher judiciary there.
Right.
They have introduced the system of somebody applying.
Right. Okay.
And it was not known earlier, and somehow or the other, I don't think that this application business should be avoided. It is the search committees that they select, people find out, go and informally find out from them, are you interested? And very generally everybody will be interested.
Yeah.
Nobody should have a feeling that I have applied and rejected.
Mr. Prasad, this whole process of appointment, the selection procedure which has been adopted so far, calling for applications from, you know, as Vinod was pointing out, maybe a Chief Justice, sitting Chief Justice has applied or somebody else has applied. You think, you know, how do you know, in your own experience, you think this is the best way to go about these things?
You see, I have a slightly different view on this inviting applications. Many people would perhaps consider it infra-dig and beneath themselves to be applying for a post. I mean, really very eminent people who otherwise would deserve to be Lokpals may not apply at all.
Right.
So therefore, I think...
Right.
So therefore, the search committee is a very important
the search
step.
committee is there, and search committee should not confine itself to only people who have applied.
Or
but
the names which have been
but
given
to
by the-
generally cast
that is
around and
the-
informally ascertain from them whether they would be willing to accept this assignment in case it is offered to them.
in your experience, which are the positions in government where such a method is employed? Are there any such any?
No, there are a number of organizations where the head of the organizations are selected through a mechanism of a search committee and by inviting applications. But there are also, I know personally, of people who have refused to apply
Right.
for such appointments.
Okay, I think Vinod, finally, would you like to say that this government would heed to all these things, criticisms or objections and you know, comments being made, and do you think that this whole process will be put off?
Well, first of all, I think that they would not be able to complete the process until before the next government is in place. I mean, that's a realistic assessment. If they are rushing it through, they will come to grief politically, and they shouldn't do it. But insofar as the army chief is concerned, this country cannot be with an army without a chief, and we need a chief who is professionally the best and who is a fair person.
Okay.
Who's a fair person, very important.
Okay, I think on that note we need to end. Both these issues, as we have discussed now, are little different from each other, and as Vinod finally pointed out, Army Chief selection is something which has to go on, whereas the Lokpal, there is a problem there, and hopefully the government will take all the suggestions and criticisms and objections into consideration while taking a final decision. We'll wait and watch what will happen. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Ajay Prasad, KN Bhat, Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan and Vinod Sharma. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on Big Picture same time tomorrow.